He was like, dude, we're at 25% of our budget is funded on day one because of recurring giving.
My name is Trevor Nelson. Welcome to Hey Nonprofits Live. Sandy Hills and Rath is our producer, and she's behind the scenes. Thanks so much for coming. I'm also the Chief Gratitude Officer of HGA Fundraising. HGA Fundraising is the provider of the most profitable auction items in fundraising. It's what pays the bills and powers this entire media, this little media company that we're growing here, and makes it all possible. So appreciate HGA for making that happen and the entire team. We're a family business and it's been pretty cool. So Sandy will put up a link and where you can learn more about HGA fundraising if you like. And then, hey, we'll have you out of here in an hour's time. It's really cool to have our friend Dave Raley on. I want to get into shout outs. Dave, I think I'm probably just hitting you out of left field with this. We're doing shout outs now. It's been really cool. Before we even do, and it could be anyone. Someone did a shout out for their mother's 90th birthday, and we shouted out a beautiful organization that crushed their live auction a few weeks ago recently and all that good stuff. And then, hey, also, this is not one-sided or two-sided. This is a two-way street. So if you're here in attendance, shout out somebody in the chat, in your life, the organization you're working for, someone's been helping you, something good. Let's just keep it positive, okay? Shout out. This is going to be really random. So we moved out in the country and we live in far Northern California, and it's very wild where we live. And there's coyotes running around in the morning and wild turkeys puffing up in our driveway. And in the spring, there are rattlesnakes. And my wife found a rattlesnake in our garage and she killed it with a kettlebell. And because they're very dangerous, and she handled it like superbly. And like I said, very random shout out, but for just because she's really gotten and embraced country living. You know, we got the side by side. We've done burn piles this spring, all that good stuff. Yeah, a big shout out to my wife just for like keeping it down, holding it down, and keeping the dirt serpents away.
I feel like that's like a P90X commercial, like just waiting to happen. Just a viral moment, like hardcore, just kettlebells can do anything.
Dude, P90X. That was a throwback, bro. That's awesome. I love it. Yeah. Hey, I know Coach Shelby, Sandy says, absolutely. Yeah. I was like, you are a savage. That's amazing. And thank you for protecting our daughter. So, hey, shout out, Dave, something impromptu, anything you want, man, as long as it's positive.
Yeah. Well, while we're going in random territory, I'm going to shout out a nonprofit. Obviously, that's topical for our episode, but I want to shout out the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Mission. I don't even know if this nonprofit exists anymore, Trevor, but they did something over 200 years ago that brings us to today. And the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Mission was the first US-based charity that had this idea that subscription giving could be a thing. And here's the cool thing. In 200 years ago, in 1815, in May of 1815, so we're just coming up on that anniversary, they had this group of missionaries in India who proposed this idea of donors sponsoring children so that they could build a new school. And that was like, you and I are the heritage of that 200 years ago. So I don't know if the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions still exists. Actually, I haven't even looked it up.
Yeah.
But shout out to them. They literally called it a subscription giving program 200 years ago.
Who knew? I love it. That's a great shout out. Yes. Random and really good. I love it. Hey, and once again, a nudge to everybody. Throw a shout out in the chat. Once again, as long as it's positive, we want you to share anything like that, anything under the sun. Once again, could be critters or, things of that nature as well. So super random Thursday morning shout out. But hey, brother, once again, a friend of ours, everybody, you're in store for an amazing episode. Dave, you'll do a better job than me, but please introduce yourself, the work that you're doing, why it means something chronologically right now, why you're here, all the above, brother, please.
Yeah, man. For me, it dates back to the beginning of finding this wild world that is the charity, philanthropy, and generosity world, and just a real moment of frustration. And that has actually turned into my life's work, which is super fun. But 22 years ago, cut my teeth figuring out this, nonprofit fundraising thing. Was working with a charity called Union Rescue Mission, and I was just banging my head against the wall, man, because the first program I ever worked on was what we would call a recurring giving program, right? It was a monthly giving program, and it kind of sucked. It was a lot of work. It was less than 5% of the organization's revenue. And it was so heartbreaking because I knew the work that the organization was doing was not only vital, but it was going on 24/7, 365. But people tended to only think of the homeless, at Thanksgiving or Christmas, which God bless them. That's wonderful. But the reality is the need goes on.
365. Yeah.
And we'll come back to that today. But I just, over the last 22 years now, have worked with hundreds of organizations, spoken to thousands around the topic of how do you create sustainable funding for your organization. Starting about a decade ago, I started to see a trend that I thought, ooh, I wonder if this is going to actually change the game for generosity. And that trend was, to no one's surprise now, subscriptions, right? It was like, well, we had Netflix and Amazon Prime and then like Pandora and Spotify. And it's like, man, these are kind of like everywhere. And then I thought, actually, I wonder if that is going to pave the way for people thinking about their giving and would they actually give on a recurring, sustainable basis to more charities? Well, sure enough, over the last 10 years, that has completely changed the game. And so have spent the last several years completely focused on how do we help charities grow sustainability in their funding model? How do we, in other words, and you and I talked about this when we spoke a year ago when the book came out, which is wild to say. When we spoke, the other way of saying it is January 1st doesn't have to be the worst day of the year. So many nonprofit leaders know what I mean. It's either January 1st or your fiscal year, if that's a different month. It's like, shoot, we just finished the fiscal year. We've got to start all over again. Got to hit the fundraising goal. But what if you didn't have to start all over again? What if you could actually start halfway up the mountain or
Yep.
25% of the way up the mountain?
Yep.
And that's a reality for more and more charities. Long story short, my background, fundraising and marketing, specifically in helping organizations and leaders see a future that is possible for them. And specifically, our expertise is in helping organizations grow sustainable giving. And so you and I connected over a year ago before the book came out, but The Rise of Sustainable Giving is the book and came out in February of this past year. For me, it has been such a fun ride because over the last year, we've seen, there it is, the rise of sustainable giving. We've seen over, I got to show you a picture in a minute, Trevor.
Please.
We've seen over 25,000 leaders exposed to the message of sustainable giving, not just the book. I've been speaking all around the country.
Yeah. You're
We
mobile.
launched
You're very mobile.
I get around. We launched the Sustainable Living podcast. But here's the point. Here's the thing, Trevor. Like I was with a leader yesterday, and I got to show you, I took this picture because I was like, it just warms my heart having invested my life and so many hours into this. So he had a copy of the book and he was like,
Yeah.
I got to show you my copy of the book. And I'm like, okay. And by the way, my
Yeah.
wife, the teacher,
Yeah.
for those of you who are listening to the podcast, this is a banged up copy of the book with about 100 different post-it notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like consuming it and then just thinking about how could this transform our organization, like how could this transform the way we think about generosity. And it's just like, man, it's been such a fun ride.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. It's been fun to watch and have these conversations, and very, very honored that you're back to talk about it. I did just put the book up on screen here, and hey, my LinkedIn profile is right there. Go ahead and connect with me or DM me and I'll send you a copy. We've sent out quite a few copies. You've been on the webinar, a couple podcasts with us, and we've sent out quite a few copies of this book. It's amazing. We can get into it and like kind of reverse engineer the subscription economy for folks from a 30,000 foot view if you want. We've covered that. Our audience has seen it and stuff. So if we have time to do that, we can. And folks, keep questions coming if you like. Anything that you'd like to ask Dave while he's here. We got him for about another 45 minutes. So definitely stay till the end and we'll get to it, all the questions we possibly can. And he's going to pop up a couple questions that we had pre-submitted as well that were really, really good. But you said you met with 25,000 leaders and, what you've learned in the last year. Get into that for the audience if you don't mind. And what's becoming more clear, some surprises, stuff like that maybe as well.
Well, I heard an author recently say something and I thought, man, that really rings true. And he said, my favorite part about writing a book is all of the things that I learn after I publish the book. And candidly, as somebody who cares deeply about, high integrity and how do we make sure we're, putting good information to the world, I thought, oh, who am I to write a book? I mean, I've been doing this certainly for a number of years, but I know there's more to learn. And so getting the book into the world was one thing, hitting bestseller list, doing all that stuff was like just a fun journey.
Hmm.
But the real fun has been seeing the beginnings of this movement and also just what I've learned. And so I haven't been able to talk with 25,000 leaders, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
I probably talked with several thousand,
Yeah.
but we've been in front of that many leaders. A couple of things have stood out to me in that time in getting exposed to that. Number one, this just level of hope that I think hasn't existed before for a lot of nonprofit leaders. I think of the, again, 22 years ago, Dave, who was just discouraged, like, man, I wish I could have a recurring revenue stream, but it's just not for us. Right. And so there's this level of belief, of hope, that I think leads to a level of belief.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've thought a lot about in the last year, and I've seen in the organizations we worked with 20, I think about 25 organizations directly in their transformation and generated about $41 million in additional recurring revenue. And when I think about the ones that have gone well and the ones that have been held back, I see this journey of going from hope, like, yeah, oh, I think actually this could be for us, to then, and this is the critical one, Trevor, to belief. They actually believe it. It's not just like, maybe this is for us. Let me try something. And if it doesn't work, well, maybe it wasn't for
There's
us.
a legit roadmap to get there. Yeah, that's the cool
Absolutely.
part. Yeah, 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 exactly.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so this is a little bit esoteric or a little, high level, but really when leadership, when the individuals that we're working with really believe that this is possible, then that leads to the next thing, which is they're actually willing to do the work. Because just like anything that's worth doing, there's work to be, there's entire strategies and tactics and stuff that we work on with clients and that you can read in the book. I put hundreds of strategies in the book, but until you believe, you're not going to do the work, or you're going to say, like, we tried. We put a button on our donation page, but it didn't work. So maybe this isn't for us. And it's like, and Trevor, you and I, and we'll talk about this today with live events, there's a belief that leadership has to have the guts to be willing to even talk about something like recurring giving at a live event, because there is that feeling of like, oh, is this going to reduce our revenue tonight? And, is there a risk here? What do we do with this? And so what I've seen from these leaders is that they move from this idea of hope, I think this could be for me, to belief, like, actually, we're going to make this happen. Like, I believe this is for us, which then translates into willingness to do the work. And there's a million little details in terms of doing the work. And I
And do
write
it the
that in the
right
book.
way.
We have a workshop we do twice a year. We have our next workshop coming up in September. We work directly with clients to directly advise them as they implement, but you've got to start with belief, because belief precedes growth.
I think with anything, you know, it's like, are you behind it? Okay, well, that's a good place. That's a good place to start, right? You know what I mean? Like, but if that could apply to anything, starting a company, all these things, like selling a product, if you're in that space or what, I mean,
And
and
belief doesn't mean there isn't doubt or like, ooh, I
that's
don't know if this
normal.
is gonna work, right?
Yeah, that's normal.
I
Yeah.
don't mean there's like blind faith or whatever, but there
Hmm.
is this kind of like conviction. Can I tell you a story?
I want to hear it.
Okay, so Eddie is one of the executive directors we worked with. He runs a charity called TCU Wesley, so it's a college-based ministry at Texas Christian University. And Eddie was actually sitting in the audience a year ago at the conference where we premiered the book. I didn't know Eddie. Eddie didn't know me. Premiered the book. We didn't meet at the conference, right? But he picked up a copy of the book. Several months later, we talked about one of our advisory windows. In terms of the limited number of organizations we work with. Long story short, we ended up starting to work together. Eddie, by the time we started working together, he had moved from hope to belief. He was like, this is for me. Now, I know there's a bunch of tactics I don't quite understand. I need to
Yeah.
figure out,
Yeah.
but I believe that this is possibly for us. Now, if you talk to Eddie, and by the way, we did an interview with Eddie on the podcast, which we can drop in the show notes. But Eddie, when we started, Eddie had, I want to say, maybe 5 or 10% of his budget actually sort of covered through recurring giving. We started working together last summer. In January, I spoke to him, January of this year. Remember, we were talking about January 1st is the worst day of the year, or it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Eddie told me he was thrilled. He was like, dude, we're at 25% of our budget is funded on day one because of
Yeah.
recurring giving.
Give folks
So
an
that's that
idea.
belief.
Yeah. Give folks some metrics of what that meant for his org. And if they're crazy, tens of millions of dollars, sorry, bro, for
Yeah,
putting you on the
and
spot. But
like I
like,
said,
yeah,
small organization, but, like, this is an organization that they more than doubled, or let me say nearly doubled their recurring giving program. But the most important thing, not only was his budget, much more funded, like I said, from under 10% to 25%, but the other thing was, and he said this to me when we did the interview, he's like, "We had a staff position that we were gonna have to cut or," and so it was like, this is real, like, in terms of our ability to do what we do, like, this has given us the steadiness,
breathing
the
room.
awareness that we can actually do this.
I love it. I love it. Hey, so you gave that example, and you said you've spoken to thousands of leaders and gotten feedback from tens of thousands and what have you, and seen what's going on in the last year. We were talking about this in the green room, so I want you to embellish a little bit about why sustainable giving is a leadership issue and what you mean by that, and kind of dive into that for the audience if you don't mind, so we can kind of
Yeah.
get that point across.
Well, and it kind of is a continuation of the point about belief, but fundamentally, there's 2 things that are going on. So we know overall that recurring giving is changing. Like, that's the first couple chapters of the book. We've talked about that in previous episodes. You can go back and listen to those. We know recurring giving's changed, which means that recurring giving is more accessible to more charities than at any other time in history. That's a fact. Like, that's not disputable. That's a thing. The question is, what are we gonna do about it? And so then there's 2 things we can do about it. Number one, and most people go here first, there are tactics and strategies we can use to grow recurring giving. I have a 7-step blueprint for growing recurring giving. We can get a link to share with folks to, be able to download the blueprint. So there's real disciplines and tactics and strategies and welcome series and event strategies, phone-based strategies, and there's all sorts of campaigns and things we can do. That's great, and that's super important, and we love doing that, and that's where the rubber hits the road. But to the point about leadership, Trevor, the other half is recurring giving is a change management problem as much as it is a tactical solutions problem. And what I
Explain.
mean by that is I can recommend or you can recommend, hey, let's do this. Let's make the ask this way, or let's do this in our response card that night or whatever. But if leadership is not only just bought in, like, yes, we believe we're willing to take the apparent risk, but also actually advocating for recurring giving and really paying attention to it, owning
Hmm.
it,
Hmm.
it's either not going to work, like in worst case, because it's going to be, well, we tried, but the leader was skeptical all along and it never really worked out, or even best case scenario, it's a cap on success because if leadership's not all in and not pushing it forward, it's just limits success.
I have a real bone to pick with leadership when they say, I don't think that we can ask that of our people right now. I've been hearing that for the 10 years that I've been in the space. No matter what cycle we're in, politically, economically, COVID, now, events, in person, virtual, I don't know if we can. And it's systemic with a lot of leaders. I don't know if we can ask that out of our people right now.
And I think there's two, maybe there's probably a dozen, but there's two things that come to mind when I hear that. I wonder,
Yeah.
Trevor, if some of that isn't a little bit of maybe fear is too strong a term, but a little bit of like,
Insecurity.
maybe not right now. And to that, I would ask, well, then when? I mean, look at the trends, like look at what other charities are doing increasingly.
Wild.
And so I think that's a piece of the puzzle. And then, like I said, it is just change, like you and I talked about a charity we worked with on the last episode who had really their event over the years had really declined. And it was just kind of like, I wouldn't say lackluster, but it kind of lost the spark.
Hmm.
And it was down kind of year over year, number of
Hmm.
attendees, dollars, all that kind of stuff. And when we started working with them, it was their 40th anniversary coming up. And so it was like, we got, our 40th anniversary is coming up. It feels like we should really take advantage of this for across the whole year, not just across our main event. But one of the things we were able to do was to just re-energize the whole thing. And not just about recurring giving, but about the anniversary and about the
Facet of it.
vision and the next 10 years of the organization. And we're going to build in recurring giving. And so I just think there is, I don't know, I just think sometimes you just have to jump, and I'm not saying I am a
Yeah,
risk averse person, but
I get
these
it.
things are not really risks. I mean, we're not talking about life and death here. We're not even talking about, losing significant funds. You're actually creating growth.
Yeah. I'm hearing what you're saying on all counts too about the fear that I think a lot of leadership have and like maybe an event getting stale and how it needs to be shaken up and what have you. And it's interesting at the same time that all that's definitely a possibility, right? About the fear and insecurity piece is I don't know very many organizations where the need is not greater.
Right. Yeah. We're like,
Right, you
we're
see what I'm saying?
mostly
Like, I
tapped
know
out here. Yeah.
I'm sorry to make it sound like a punchline, but you get my point, right? Like, so very, very interesting there. What about yeah, I mean, because I was like I said, the bone to pick that I have is, like, asking more at your event, and my big worry is that people won't utilize a tool like this that is working at countless other events, whether it's honestly, it doesn't need to be like the gala big auction. It could be a community event where we're introducing the sustainable giving program as well, because it means something and we need buy-in from as many people, right? But talk about for the audience, because so much of the audience is event driven, why the event itself, whether it's the gala, the next auction, the next sponsorship event, the next recognition dinner might be the greatest place to introduce a sustainable giving program.
Yeah. Well, and this goes back to at least the last several decades, even of recurring giving. And there's just something about the emotional resonance of an in person embodied space to make a big decision, whether that's a big life decision because you went to some seminar, right, and made a big life decision,
Yeah.
or in this
Tony
case,
Robbins.
making
Tony
a
Robbins.
decision to actually like step into an ongoing giving relationship with a charity. The reality is choosing to commit to giving to a charity on a monthly basis, for example, is a much bigger commitment than, yeah, I'll give you, 25 bucks at Thanksgiving, or I'll put some change in the jar, kind of a deal. And so it's a bigger emotional decision. And there's also something about having the attention of the audience. We send emails to audience, to our organization, or we send direct mail pieces or whatever it is. And the reality is you have a tiny fraction of their attention in that moment. Like
Totally.
they maybe read the subject line, maybe they even open the email and read a few emails, but even as they're reading, their kids are, asking them for something, or they're jumping to the next task or whatever, right? We don't have their attention. But when you're sitting in the room and we have your full attention and we've taken you, hopefully, in your event on an emotional journey, you've just got the two ingredients that are like the perfect ingredients for any ask, which is one reason why I think live events do well. And by the way, to your point, these don't all have to be banquets or galas or whatever.
Totally.
We've done this at an open house with a charity. We had another charity on the podcast that does just basically house dinners. They do like potlucks, basically at houses, and they have but it's not just like, hey, come and hang out and eat food and then leave. No, there's like a journey to even that evening, right? And how do we lead to that? So I think there's something about it being embodied. I think there's something about having the full undivided attention of the audience, and then also the ability to just curate a really powerful emotional journey through stories and all five senses. And right, there's just so many opportunities there. And so that's one of the areas I'm most bullish about in terms of like channels, we'll say, for fundraising, is the possibility for live events to really become the leading channel when it comes to growing recurring giving.
I love that. I love that. Um, how give a couple examples. I mean, we've got plenty of examples. You shared like the fund to need, moment at the $250 level, with your friend. And I want to get into the force multiplier of sustainable giving and what that means over the course of that donor supporters lifetime with the organization, right? The lifetime value. I want to get into that as well, but give some examples about the easiest way you've seen without scaring off donors or confusing donors or overwhelming teams. Some of the easiest ways you've seen, like the lowest lift ways that you've seen folks introduce sustainable giving at events. If it's as simple as what I just mentioned, the fund to need paddle race portion, buy this and you can automatically get enrolled in the program. And is it a good idea to ask folks for permission to get them in the program monthly moving forward at checkout? Or if they made any purchase, for instance, I love this idea. Hey, you made any purchase? Would you like to be a part of the sustainable giving program that's branded as this project, if you will? And that's at checkout, like that opportunity there, like stuff like that. Like give folks some like low lift ideas if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think when it comes to live events, there's a few things. And caveat, I'm not a live event professional. That's why I keep hanging out with you and having people who run live events. Like there's so much nuance to how you do a really good live event, whether it's a gala or a golf tournament or whatever, right? However, some things I've noticed. Number one is that recurring giving is not like a sideshow. Like, yeah, we had a table in the lobby that said recurring giving, or I won't name, organizations I've worked with, but it's like, well, yeah, they had a table in the corner at the golf tournament, in the luncheon. It's like, hey, nobody's going to that table.
Totally.
And B,
Yeah, yeah.
nobody even knows what that is,
There was no one there, and it was like there was like a QR code. Yeah, I got
Yeah.
you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Don't do that. That's kind of
Yeah.
a not, don't do. But the corollary to that is it is a kind of a main stage moment. Now, I have not seen an event, and I'm totally fine with this in the kind of events we're talking about where recurring giving is the main or only ask. It's usually a separate or supplementary ask, but it's real. One of the things I think is really key is to not let people off the hook. And I'll quote. Actually, you and I talked about Kirk Walden, who we had on the podcast, who he's a fun guy. He's done dozens of events. He's kind of comedian slash just
He's got the
heartfelt
accent. Yeah, he's a
guy, right? Yeah,
character.
he's
Yeah,
got the
yeah,
southern accent. He's so
yeah.
great. Anyways, but one of the things he said is he casts a vision. He says, thanks to the generous sponsor, sustainers that we have in the room, frontline partners or whatever you call them, we have in the room, this last year, 100 kids were able to go to camp. I remember that from our conversation, right? That
Right.
kind of thing. But then, and he does this, he doesn't let anybody off the hook. He says, tonight, if every, family or couple in this room gives, we could do X more. Like, what if
Right.
everyone tonight steps up? So he doesn't say, like, what if some of you or like 5 of you maybe could go to the side table and, raise your hand. Maybe could you? It's like he's bold. And the fun part about him is he's a third party. So he's like, I'm going to be bold on your behalf, organization. And so I love that. I love that it's visible. I love that there's some social kind of proof there because you said, hey, these people were already, because of faithful monthly donors already. If you have enough in the room, hey, would you raise your hand if you're a frontline partner or whatever? I think is great. And then if it's a different type of event, I'll just give you another example, like with a open house.
Recognition dinner, awards, or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, where it's not the main thing, where it's like, "Oh, this is an open house, not even a fundraising event," or it's an awards. We had Eddie, I mentioned, they do events where they bring parents in to, like, talk about the programming, and we're
Yes.
working with your kids and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
There are tasteful ways to really introduce it. Sometimes it's a little more passive, like, "Hey, we've put a card on everybody's seat, and we wanna tell you about our front," and this, it's called The Home. That's what Eddie's program is called. And we wanna tell you about The Home because we provide a home for your students, we provide a home for other students, but you actually provide a home for them, not just in the literal sense, but by joining with The
By
Home,
giving.
you can
Yeah.
help provide a home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's kind of a light, kind of ask in that way. The open house example was every 30 minutes or an hour, every hour, the executive director got up and gave a quick 5 to 7 minute update on the state of the work that we're doing in this community. But what she did was she actually said, and it's so awesome that you're here today. The work that we're doing, as you can see, goes on 24/7, 365. And the most important thing for us to accomplish what we need to do in the next year is that we have stable, viable funding to do what we need to do. And I want to tell you a little bit about our Hope Partners program or whatever it's called. Um, and we're actually today looking to see 10 new Hope Partners join with the organization. In fact, we've got a donor who's generously agreed to double the first gift of every new
Okay.
Hope Partner. And this is like an open house where it's not a fundraising event. Cast that vision, make a clear ask, incentivize conversion, and then and then close well. And they had physical, like you could pick up a card and make a
Mhm.
decision. And on your way out, if you decided to give, to become a Hope Partner or whatever, then they gave you a branded sort of,
Something to leave with. I think recognition like that, at the biggest fundraiser of the year, or like you said, an open house, I think is super smart. Something to leave with, something tangible. I don't care if it's a bling ring.
yeah,
I'm a part of the program now. Oh, really? How'd you get that? That I'm cool with that. I think it's fun. I think it's novel. I think it's a cool way to introduce something like this. It kind of takes the hooks out, so to speak, maybe, and brings the levity into the situation a little bit as well. There was a lot to unpack there, Dave. Real surface level question. And I know it's unique for every different organization, but because you work with so many, you got so much data. No one's done this before at their event, for instance.
Mm.
Once again, famously, you shared your buddy that did the 250 a month. You're like, You're like, I was floored by that. Like, that was cool. Like that kind of thing. What is a good number that you've seen? And once again, every event has its own atmosphere, uniqueness, capacity in the room, all that good stuff, and maybe even just get in the weeds, like how you derive that number or
Number,
what
yeah.
have you.
And by
Yeah,
number, you mean like the sort of actual giving amount?
I do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I do. Yeah. And I mean, you want me to give you metrics? It's like we have 300 people in the room. We don't have a sustainable giving program right now. We're going to start everybody at $100 or what have you, or that kind of thing.
And again, and us all, this is an area we need to continue to really experiment with and learn. And I want to come hang out with more Kirks and more Trevors to be like, okay, how do we, what is the
Auctioneers. I think you should
best
talk to
here?
some
Auctioneers.
auctioneers. Yeah, absolutely.
What I've seen though is that it's not a fixed price point is not the sort of right way to think about it, for lack of a
Okay.
better term.
Okay.
Though I always talk about how do we plant seeds, because there's people in the room that $5,000 a month is like the same as what $100 a month is to you and I.
Totally.
$100 a month would be a big commitment to certain people. To
Yeah.
other people,
Context.
that is the equivalent of $5,000 a month just because of where they're at and kind of how
Yeah.
they do things and how
Yeah.
they think. And I've also said this a lot before, especially with events, event-based fundraising is, which because those often are more middle or major style donors. Number one, they're subscribers too. They're giving to charities, many of them increasingly on a recurring basis. They have donor advised funds, by the way. That's a whole separate
Totally.
thing, and they'll set up a monthly donor advised fund check to come to your organization.
Awesome.
And so actually totally lost my train of thought. I was
Well, yeah.
on donor
No, but you
advised.
were making really good points about, yeah, like introductory, numbers and
The the
context.
sort of
Yeah.
how do you, I call it pricing strategy, and we covered this in the workshop, but the short version is plant seeds. Like, how can you actually just plant seeds? Hey, people who are frontline partners give sacrificially. For some of you, that might mean $25 a month. For others, that might be $2,500 a month. What matters is that donors are giving in a way that makes an ongoing impact in the lives of the kids we work with, blah, 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 blah. And you're just sort of like throwing like numbers out there. And so that's kind of the best strategy that I've seen, because then, to your point about my story, and just to very briefly recap it, I was sitting at one of these organizations auctions with somebody who I knew at least a little bit, and we got to talking, and he had never given to the organization before, but he just felt led to come to this event. And so, new donor, and also somebody that I know. And I'm not like, you're a high roller, right? And so, but anyways, when they did the paddle raise moment, and they boldly said, "Hey, if you're willing to commit to a monthly gift at that amount, raise your paddle or raise your extra card with the paddle or whatever."
Right.
And yeah, when we get to the $250 level, I look over and his paddle and card are up, and I'm like, that's a monthly commitment. And so, first time donor, $250 a month. Obviously, you can do the math for a year, but the reality is, if he stays around as long as the average recurring donor, that's usually about 40 months. That's a $10,000 commitment he made that night. Like, I'll take one of those. I'll take two of those. That organization, by the way, didn't quite double, but like nearly doubled their recurring giving program that night.
So
Not
good.
all the gifts were at 250. There were a
Yeah.
variety.
Yeah.
I think probably the most common was 50,
Yeah.
but like, that's pretty transformational.
Big deal. I'm bullish on. I think there's ways to create monthly giving at the intro an event, and I think there's absolutely. I'm more bullish about the fund and need paddle raise portion of the event. I love how you introduced the idea of a matching gift opportunity. We hit this point, we have someone, a generous sponsor or what have you. Gosh, Dave, this is actually going to segue really, really well into my next question, or not necessarily a question, but it's a point I really want you to make clear to the audience too. It's like, what if you have that match and you're introducing the program night of for the first time, and the importance, which is great, right? But it's going to segue into the importance of making sure it's branded. You had your
Yeah,
friend
the name of
Eddie
the
call
frontline
the
partners or whatever. Yeah,
home.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we have our good friend Chris. He created this $600,000 a year Halo project where she was handwriting 400 thank you notes, and until she had to automate it. And I want to get into the follow up piece. Some folks will call it stewardship, but I want to get in the follow up piece and how important that is. But explain to folks how night of, in a general sense as well, how important it is to brand these programs and what that means, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important. And, people do ask me that question, like, oh, should our program have a name, and the short answer is yes, if you haven't picked up on that by now. The long answer is there are some different ways to brand your program, all that stuff. But here's the thing I would say. Don't let whether or not you have a cool, clever name for your program hold you back.
Love
The
that. Love
open
that.
house example, by the way, that was the same charity when they did the open house event that had no like they had no program name. They were just calling it sort of like monthly supporters, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
like, we don't have time to create a program, just ask. And they generated in that instance, they generated $10,000 of long-term giving in a one morning at an open house that wasn't a fundraising event. Well, if I had said wait 6 months and go like come up, get your creative team together and go
Put
come up
that in
with a cool
chat.
name,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
so number one, don't let it hold you back. However, if you're really disciplined and you're really looking to make this a significant growth thing, I think you do need to have a program. And then and we unpack this in the book and in the workshop and the work we do with clients, but it goes beyond a name. But a name is often one of the early things. It's like, okay, what do we call them? And there are different types of naming. There's sort of what we would call fanciful naming, where it's more sort of poetic or like, so for
Hmm.
example, Charity Water has the spring. Now, like that's
Totally. Yep.
what was the Halo project one? Do you
The
remember?
Halo project was actually for the Oklahoma City Catholic Charities.
Yeah, like
You know,
the
with
Halo
with
project.
with their they were servicing like 15 programs, so it had to have a moniker. You know.
So, but that would be an example of what I would call like a fanciful name, where it was like
Yeah.
kind of a metaphor or whatever.
Yeah.
And there are some things to avoid when you do that, but that's approach. Another one would be just descriptive. It's called. So it's like freedom partners,
Yeah. Yeah.
humane heroes from the Humane Society. Like there's a lot of different sort of ways, but it's just more like describes what they are, which is fine too. So having a name is good, but I think having a program and this will get us into another topic, which is recurring giving is not just a checkbox. And I think a lot of organizations today still essentially treat recurring giving as like an optional gift type. And it's like, well, our assumption is you're going to give a one-time gift, but if you want to check the box, like we would love that. Or if you want to go visit the table in the back,
Yeah.
that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And the reality is, recurring giving is its own thing. It should be its own program. It should have its own brand, but also it should have what we call an ongoing value proposition. Why should I give to your organization rather than some other organization to you on an ongoing basis? What is the ongoing impact in the lives of blank, that you work with? And so we want to have an ongoing value proposition. And there's some other nuances in there in terms of like benefits and
Yeah.
how we incentivize. But having a program, I think, is important. But if you don't have one and you have an event in 2 weeks, candidly, don't let that hold you back.
Totally. Yeah. Don't let that create paralysis. Funny how we got a question from Jonathan while we were talking about that, because I want to get into retention. I want to get into basically the gratitude campaign when someone does check the
We do.
box.
Well, first, let's
Well,
talk about retention in terms of just the averages. Um, the average donor across all of nonprofits, the average donor retains, the retention rate is what is 42%, which means 42% of donors give the subsequent year. Okay. The average retention rate for sustainable giving donors, recurring donors, is somewhere between 78 and 84, double the retention rate.
yeah.
Here's the thing, Trevor, and this is a little bit, you have some bones to pick. I have some bones to pick too. I think retention, candidly, is not the metric we should be using, because I think retention is kind of a nice metric. It's like, well, 42% of our donors give year over year, 84%. I think a much more motivational metric we should be using is churn.
Yeah.
How many of our donors don't give the
Yeah.
next year?
Yeah.
Which is, if you think about it, just the opposite of it's just the opposite of retention. And if we were a subscription business right now, we would be measuring our churn. Like how many customers are we churning? And we would be really sweating the details on churn. And by the way, I think there's just a simple psychology why churn is more motivational than retention. And that is because as humans, we like to avoid pain much more than we
Opportunity
like.
lost. Yeah.
Yeah,
Opportunity lost is
much,
far more
much more
motivating.
than we like to pursue pleasure. And
Correct.
candidly, retention
Yep.
is pleasure, churn is pain. And if
So
I
good.
tell you, so let's use those exact same numbers. I'm going to say the exact same numbers, but as churn numbers. 58% of your donors are going to churn next year. 58% of them. No matter how much work you do, how hard
On
how much
average.
effort you put in, how much money you spend on them, 58% of them on average are not going to give again last year.
Mhm.
Like that sucks. Now, let's use the same number for recurring donors. 14% of your recurring donors are going to churn next year. Now, that still hurts. I still want that to be now 12% or 10%, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing is number one, recurring donors, no matter what you do, candidly, are going to retain at much higher rates. Now, to Jonathan's question, that does not mean we don't have anything to do. So there's three things we want to do when it comes to cultivating our monthly donors or our recurring donors. The first is we need to affirm them. So the word affirm.
Mhm.
Affirm, affirm, affirm. Like that's not just a thank you or a receipt letter. That's also other ways of just like, it might be a call
Thank
on your
you.
anniversary. Yep. Like we want to affirm them. A note from the CEO that says, hey, I know that this is sacrificial for you. It means the world in the lives of the people that you care about, kind of
Yes.
stuff. So affirm.
Yes.
The second is to engage. And engage might mean as simple as, well, with some faith-based organizations, they might say, hey, how can we pray for you? Like, just
Mhm.
respond to this email
Mhm.
and let us know how we can pray for you. Another might be like, hey, we want to give you an update on this program. So watch this video. There are different ways to engage them. So we want to affirm them, we want to engage them. And then the last one, which might be counterintuitive to some, is to ask. Because one of the mistakes that organizations make is they stop asking recurring donors because they think, whoa, 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 we don't want to mess with a good thing. They're giving monthly.
Funny how we're coming full circle. Like, I don't think right now is the right time. You know what I mean? Type thing. Yeah,
You're
yeah.
like, oh, these people are giving monthly. The reality is your recurring donors are some of your most faithful supporters and you're most likely to give additional one-time gifts. We see on average that donors will give 25% in addition to whatever they're giving annually through recurring giving. So if I'm a $50 donor and I give, 600, so that means that's $600 a year,
Year.
that I'm giving on average, that donor will give another $150 or 25% in a gift at year end or a gift in response to some disaster that you're responding to. And so we don't want to not ask donors. We should not, depending on how much you ask your donors, maybe you need to reduce the asks or whatever, but we need to give recurring donors additional opportunities to give. And so affirm our recurring donors. There's set it and forget it doesn't exist anymore. Like that is an old phrase that needs to die because donors don't forget. They have an app that's telling them, did you know you're giving to charity XYZ? Are you
Totally.
sure you want to still give to them? So we want to ask them, we want to affirm them, we want to engage them, and we want to strategically ask them for additional
Yeah.
gifts.
Yeah. And I'm thinking when for both, I mean, at least in my brain, I'm thinking with affirm and engage. I'm thinking if you don't know what to say, you can say thank you. I'm thinking, well, it's interesting. We have to name this fellow that was at your table that had never been to the event before that we talk about so much that gave the $250. That's became a over time through the math that he's going to become a $10,000 level giver over time, right? Of course, we all want more of those, you know, but I'm thinking about him from he's never been to the event before and he
Yeah,
decided to give
first time
250 a
giver.
month. So it's like, for him affirming him, do it in the moment, go meet him and everyone else that you possibly can that evening. Okay, there's one. And the personalized message, the thank you, the phone call, and engage to me. Oh, sorry. Wow, I didn't even know that I was going to do that.
Here.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, those are the settings. Yeah, but I mean, like, invite him, his spouse, whoever they might be, to your organization's office, to your headquarters, or well, I mean, different examples. Let's get into that a little bit. Yeah.
I think, and again, this is something that I'm even learning. I'm trying to think of how Kirk said it. We talked about the interview I did with him. He said that one of the in my words, not his, but one of the mistakes that nonprofits make is they see their events as a place to sort of catalyze their existing donors, which is great. But his point is, events are great major donor discovery engines.
Oh, oh,
And a lot of times, and again, I can't remember exactly. He said it much more eloquently than I can remember it, but it's like they're going to give a gift, and maybe it's a $500 gift or $1,000 gift or whatever, but that's candidly not their capacity. Like that's a like, hey, we had a good time,
a test almost, if you will,
Right,
for
it's a
lack of a
test,
better
and
term.
so he
Yeah.
talks about this is where you're discovering your new major supporters. So what are you doing to follow up the next week and say, "Hey, it was so good to have you at the event. I'd love to grab lunch. I'm gonna be in town," you know? week,
normal stuff
right?
that, yeah, that
Yeah,
flees us.
like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and again, I've not had to run these events myself, but I can imagine a nonprofit leader feeling just like, "Thank God that's over, like, exhausted,
Mhm.
now let's move on to the next strategy
Yeah.
or the next thing that we're planning." But are you identifying those, especially new donors, and are you actually doing outreach? Are you actually cultivating those relationships? Are you inviting them to come and take a tour of the facility? Because that $1,000 donor might actually be a $10,000 donor, right? And so, but just that idea that events as major donor discovery engines was like, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, on top of that, Dave, as well, it's like, on average, at least there should be a goal to have new folks in the room year over year. And the average is about half are folks that have never been before. Okay, great. You know, another thing, and that was a good point by Kirk, so I appreciate that. Great episode once again. Check it out, the Sustainable Giving Podcast. So good with Kirk. So we got 5 minutes left. Any other questions from folks, please? We got Dave here. How do I frame this? It's not like a bone to pick or anything like that, but there's folks in our world that'll say like the live auction giving is going to take away from the fund to need. It's not true. I want to address the folks that might be on the fence, so to speak, about, okay, well, this is going to pull from a different part of our program or our night or our fundraising if we add sustainable giving or this new program to our event. Any like feedback that you've gotten from folks that had
Yeah.
trepidation about that? Now, I'm very bullish on that's not the case, however, but I'm not going to do the thinking for everybody. I just kind of want to address it because it is popular for folks to create opposing. Oh yeah, you don't need the silent auction anymore because it's going to pull away from this. And of course, in our world, it's all about the fund to need and the fantastic. I absolutely think it should be a massive, component of the evening. However, one does not rob the other, right? So I want to
Yeah,
just because I
it's
think that it's common in our space that folks have that trepidation. Dave.
yeah, and I want to make sure I'm totally understanding, but I'll answer to because this has come up. This kind of thing has come up a couple of times,
Yeah,
and then you can steer me if this doesn't quite get it. But number one, as just a general fundraising principle, whatever you can do to have funding be undesignated is ideal, right?
totally,
For the
totally.
from a financial and flexibility perspective. And so, to the extent that you can, make all of your asks essentially undesignated. Now, you may talk about very specific examples of things that we're trying to do this next year. We're trying to expand into this community, or we're trying to do that sort of, but almost like as a bundle of things and say, so tonight, would you step up and help support to make all of that happen? Right. So then that way you have some flexibility. So we had one organization that actually had the inverse where their night was specifically for I don't remember if it was like their women's programming specifically, but it was like just for a portion of what they did. And so I just said, "Hey, it's up to you, but if I were you, when you do talk about the monthly gift, the recurring gift, I think you should just talk about it as your overall program. Make sure
Yeah,
it's super clear.
yeah.
This fuels everything that we do. It
Hmm.
fuels the women's stories you've heard tonight. It fuels the, blah blah blah." And obviously internally, I don't know if there was any tension there, but obviously you would imagine there could be. But yeah, basically, I don't know if that helps, but for me, it's like, as with integrity, like we're not baiting and switching anybody. Can we just make sure we are articulating what we're trying to do and say, would you stand with us as we try to do that? Now, this is different than I'm trying to fund the new van we want to purchase. Well, if you do that, then you had better put those funds towards the new van, or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah. 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 Totally. No. Yeah. I basically my point is I wanted to nudge folks to think that and to understand that adding a sustainable giving opportunity at your event is not going to rob from anything else traditionally that you've done. I guess is my
Yeah.
point. Yeah. Yeah. I really wanted to put a highlight on that. Hey, Sandy is going to give us a winner. And then any other questions before we kick Dave out of here? It's been awesome. Thank you so much for coming again, brother. Anyone that's listening to this recording, leave us a comment, a question for Dave. There's going to be plenty of ways you can reach out to Dave in the show notes. And he's going to give me a winner for, oh, well, thank you, Tam. Appreciate you so much. We have a winner today for $1,000 in HGA bucks. And I'm going to send Jessica a copy of The Rise of Sustainable Giving. Anyone that would like a copy, just DM me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email. We'll get you a copy. I can't guarantee it'll be signed. I could sign it if you want me to. Anyway, today's winner is Jessica. Our Bildo, sorry, pardon me. Arbildo, grateful gatherings providing new and gently used furniture to people experiencing economic hardship or major life transitions. Congratulations, Jessica. Thanks so much for coming. Appreciate you so much. And yes, a copy of The Rise of Sustainable Giving. We'll make sure that we get that to you. So thanks so much for coming, Jessica. Sorry, my eyes are failing me in my age. So appreciate you so much for coming. And thanks everybody else for coming. Dave, thank you so much for coming. Any parting shots? You want to do another shout out? Whatever you want to do
Love it.
before we kick out of here.
Well, it's our timing. You and I talked about this before we got on. Our timing couldn't be better. I can't say it live, but we are going to be making a major announcement in May 1st of 2026 that I hope we'll look back on in 10 or 20 years and see as a pretty pivotal moment in philanthropy. It has to do about sustainable giving. If you
Yeah.
don't, you can guess that part.
Good.
So please stay tuned. If you're interested in getting any updates from us, I write an article every week, not just on sustainable giving, but on innovation and growth. We have a biweekly podcast, the Sustainable Giving Podcast, and then we are doing research even as we speak on some things that I think will be really helpful. So if you're interested in any of that, just go to sustainablegiving.org and you can sign up right there on the homepage, and we send a email or two a week, just kind of, hey, this is what's going on, this is what we're seeing. So if you want to stay close to that, we've got a workshop coming up here in September. And I love LinkedIn, man. Like if you want to connect on LinkedIn, just look me up, Dave Raley, and we'll chat.
Love it. Yeah. That's your nudge, everybody. Please do reach out to Dave. Thank Dave. And as mentioned, go to sustainablegiving.org and yeah, you'll get all the updates. And it sounds like a very exciting thing in May that you got launching. So very, very happy that y'all are doing that. And thanks for the time, man. Thanks for the work. Thanks for the book. And here's your invite to come back in the future as well. Can't thank you enough, brother. Appreciate you so much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sandy. Have a good day, everybody. Thanks, Jody. Appreciate you. Thanks, everybody, for coming. And we'll see you all next Thursday.